Welcome, everyone, and good evening to you. Hope you guys are doing really well. It's been an interesting day, and I thank you for coming to Live and Alive with me and my guest. Now, tonight we're going to be dealing with a subject which many people for centuries have had so much difficulty in talking about and dealing with. So tonight I'm looking for some answers. Hopefully, those same answers will give you some answers. To help us deal with it, I'm joined by Zoe Aston, and she is the brainiest woman I have ever known in my life. Welcome, Zoe.
Hi, Derek. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. It's a tough subject, isn't it? Why did you choose to go into this occupation, Zoe?
I chose to go into it via my own struggles with mental health, which I think is often important for people to know because they then know that I'm coming from a background of my own sort of mental health difficulties,
Yes.
as well as having a master's degree in psychology and lots of experience as a therapist and mental health consultant. But yeah, fundamentally, it was off the back of my own difficulties.
Mm. And tell me something. How long were you in that kind of space? Was it a long time?
I would say throughout my teens mostly, but looking back, I can see that I had a sort of predisposition to it, probably from when I was quite young, but it didn't really come to the surface until I was sort of mid-teens, and then by the time I was sort of 18, 19, 20, I was quite poorly with eating disorders and self-harm and depression and anxiety. Um, and it was after that experience, when I got therapy and treatment for that, that I sort of decided that actually I find this absolutely fascinating, and I love talking to people. So I'm going to go and study psychology.
Yes. So, with that experience and the technical knowledge, so to speak, how would you define mental health?
Okay, so mental health, I do a lot of comparisons to physical health because I'm trying to be part of the conversation that destigmatizes it and just, brings the sort of taboo to a close for the next generation or the generation after that. And the way I choose to define mental health to make it really accessible for people is that just like your body is your arms and your legs and your torso and your hips and your head, your mental health is your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. It is a bit more complicated than that when we go into it, but to just understand what your mental health actually is, I say to people, just think about it as your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. Nothing more complicated than that.
And with the knowledge of mental health, are there any cures for mental health problems?
Big question. I think prevention is certainly better than a
Mhm.
cure, and that's kind of what we're working towards at the moment. We have a lot of preventative medicine in terms of our physical well-being. We know to exercise, we know to eat right, we know to sort of get the right sleep. Whether we do it or not is another question.
Mhm.
With mental health, there is less preventative options out there because we just haven't been talking about it or exploring it for long enough. But in terms of a cure, I think a bit like a physical problem, it's something that's usually people have to kind of manage on a daily basis. So I'd be hesitant to say that, yes, there's a cure for mental health because if you think about it as a comparison to physical health, we wouldn't say, oh, yeah, there's a cure to physical health. And mental health, I think, needs to be kind of brought on a par with that, so that it just becomes part of our daily practices and part of our kind of health journey. That it becomes a focus rather than something that we want to get rid of, or we don't want to talk about, or we need to fix in some way.
Are you able to say what type of thing causes mental health problems?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a few different schools of thought. There's a school of
Mhm.
thought that sort of it's a biochemical imbalance. We're talking about mental health problems now. We're not talking about mental health. Everyone has mental health, but things like anxiety, depression, eating disorders, addiction, um, and then to the other end of the scale, schizophrenia, psychosis, manic depression, bipolar. Some of those things are born out of a sort of chemical imbalance in the brain, and a way of kind of coping with that if you move into some sort of recovery is lifestyle and potentially medication and therapy and whatnot. But for most people, their mental health problems come from a combination of four things, and that's usually that it
Mhm.
kind of, and we're talking about mental health problems, remember, not mental health full stop, because mental health full stop, everyone has. Mental health issues
Mhm.
usually come from some kind of genetic disposition. So it normally comes down families, usually an event that the person finds traumatic. So something that they found difficult to go through, whether that's social anxiety, being at school, or a traumatic event that they see as traumatic.
Mhm.
Then they have to sort of come into contact with the thing. So, for example, this is more related to stuff like addictions and eating disorders, but they have to come into contact with, say, alcohol, drugs, food, exercise, shopping, money, whatever it is that actually kind of takes the edge off for them. And then the other thing,
Mhm.
which is really important, and this is where kind of I'm big on the sort of social side of it, is that their peer group, their social circles have to be tolerating what's going on there. So if someone's very anxious or very depressed, or someone's got an eating disorder or an addiction, or they are going through some kind of post-traumatic stress, if the circle that they swing in tolerates that behavior, the behavior will continue. Whereas if
Manage.
the people around them were able to say, hey, like, this is not all right, something's going
Mhm.
on, we need to help you, we would probably find that mental health difficulties stopped, or were prevented from getting too sophisticated and too entrenched in the person. And there's lots of research around that, especially in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder. But if you think about it, if I broke my leg and I tried to like go to work or to the gym or out with my friends, they would be like, no, hang on, we need to take you to A&E. You've got a broken leg, right?
Right.
But if I'm a bit anxious or a bit stressed, or I'm showing signs of depression, or I'm acting out in some way, everyone just kind of turns a blind eye, which is why the fourth point is really important. The social point of it is really important. If we were
Mhm.
able to call each other on this type of behavior, we would have a very different world around mental health.
But it's probably very likely that you surround yourselves with people who will always say, "Oh, that's just John playing up. Leave him." Yeah.
Yeah, and we do that because we sometimes we prefer the pain that we do know than the pain that we don't know. So we will surround ourselves with people, and I use the word manipulate, but I don't mean it in a kind of like a nasty or a mean way, but we sort of like manipulate people so that we can stay where we are, because we don't like what we can't see, and we're scared of change. We all like the
Mhm.
idea of change, but when it actually comes to change and doing something differently, the truth is that
Mhm.
we're human beings and we're absolutely petrified. It's that's why, and I'm sure you'll relate to this. Lots of people sign up for fitness courses and they sort of turn up for a couple of days, and then once it gets a bit difficult, they're like, "Oh no, actually, it's not for me. I've
Drop
got to
off.
work overtime that day," and there's some kind of reason that they can't do it anymore. We're scared of
Mhm.
change, so yes, we surround ourselves with people who potentially might not challenge us in that way, or we haven't let them know that we want to be challenged in that way.
Right. Tell me this. What do you think is the number one? Now, this is probably a difficult question to answer. The number one cause of depression.
Yeah, I can answer that actually. In my book, and this is just my
Mm.
book, so take what you need and leave the rest. But depression is usually caused by a suppression of emotion, a suppression, a repression, a depression of
Mhm.
emotion. So when we push our feelings down, they start to compress and get stuck. And I always imagine depression to be this like heavy sort of like brick-like thing that lives in my belly if I'm thinking about depression in my life. Um, and if you think about, I always sounds a bit weird, but if you think about when cars get compressed into like a really small, like
Yes. Yes.
block in
Yeah.
movies and stuff,
Mm.
and that block actually weighs like 3 tons. It's the size of a brick. I could hold it in my hands, but it weighs about 3 tons, and it is the depression of the car that has
Mm-hmm.
been put into that tiny little space. So anyway, the point being that depression is usually a repression of emotion, and anxiety too. Depression and anxiety sit on top of unprocessed emotion, which often, and people don't like to hear this, but often within that, a high quantity of those feelings are things like anger and fear. And if we don't face the fact that we are angry about things, or we don't face the fact that we are scared about things and work through that, we do get sad and depressed, and we blank out, and we turn off. And often,
Mm-hmm.
interestingly, for anyone out there who's struggling with depression, the scariest time about depression is when you start to wake up, because you often, when you wake up the depression, you often start to feel quite angry. And that's
Mm-hmm.
that's the time when you want to be looking for someone who knows about depression and is able to help you kind of work through that, and what's been bubbling under the surface for maybe a few weeks, a few months, a few years, whatever length of time it's been going on.
So tell me this then. I mean, you went there, you've been there, you've lived through it. Did you know you were going through it when it was happening? Or did someone point it out to you? Your behavior patterns and stuff like that?
I didn't know I was depressed and anxious. I didn't know I was depressed and anxious until I was much, much, much older, and I was able to be like, oh, this is probably why I behaved in such strange ways, because I'm up against depression and this anxiety on a daily basis. But as a teenager, lots of the sort of self-loathing that I had, and the sad feelings that I had, and the scared feelings that I had, I sort of used that to define myself, which I think lots of people do. I thought, well, this is just me. I'm, destined to a life of feeling this way and doing this stuff, and that's kind of it. I couldn't really see into the future at all. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so the answer is yes, I knew that I wasn't behaving normally in terms of my eating disorder and like my self-harm and those kind of outward behaviors. But did I know I was depressed and anxious? No. I knew about the behaviors I was using to help myself cope with that, but I wouldn't have been able to name it at the time.
Yeah. Okay. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think there are lots of people probably sitting in that space at the moment and don't quite know how to get out of it. But let's just turn it around a little bit for a moment. Can you say uh, how that you have good mental health if you're in this kind of position?
In my position as a
Anyone,
therapist.
anyone.
Oh,
Yeah. So in analyzing myself, can I say that technically I have good mental health if, for example, I'm a very optimistic person? I set goals. Can you define it like that?
I don't think so. I think, strangely, someone else asked me a similar-ish question last week. And I
Mm,
think the thing is that it's all kind of unique. It's the same as our bodies. I could work out the same as you, the same as the next person. I could eat the same as the next person and work out the same as the next person. I would still have a body that looked different to theirs. And our brains are kind of similar in that we could all do the same things, but not everything works for everyone. And it's really important that you find what is good for your own mental health hygiene and your own well-being, rather than just copying what other people are doing. And I'm quite big on this in terms of self-care, because it's really common that people see self-care stuff on the internet or psychology stuff on social media, and they try to work, and they think, oh my gosh, I'm broken, I'm never going to be fixed, none of this stuff works for me, and it's working
mhm.
for everyone else. And I'm like, no, 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 no. It's just because you don't know how to put it into action for you, and you probably don't quite know why it is that it works for other people, and you don't quite know how to get it working for you. So for me, often good mental health hygiene is about, or good mental health is about, balance and being in tune with myself, and attuning to my needs and wants on a daily basis, and being very honest about the choices that I make and taking responsibility for those things. Um,
But
for some
but if I feel
people,
good about myself, Zoe, if I feel
yeah,
really good about myself and I think I've got good self-esteem, I set goals, I'm really optimistic. I feel always happy. Does that mean I'm in good mental place, or am I disguising something else?
I
Could
mean,
I
I
be?
would still, yeah, I would still challenge it slightly because I don't talk about good self-esteem or bad self-esteem. So I talk about
Right.
strong self-esteem or like where your
Yeah.
self-esteem is at, because being liking ourselves and being esteemed is about feeling that we are equal to everybody else. And we used to use these terms like my self-esteem is high or my self-esteem is low, and then people get
Mm,
confused and they're like, well, I don't want to feel better than other people. I don't want to come across as arrogant, and then it makes it difficult for them to work on their confidence and their relationship with themselves. So self-esteem is about feeling equal to other people, not better than, not worse than, not good, not bad, no judgments. So I mean, I would say if you were working on your self-esteem on a regular basis, then yes, you're
mm,
working on your mental health, and you could, on your own sort of scale of things, which changes over time, because if you'd asked me
mhm,
10 years ago, my scale of where I am in terms of my mental health would be very different to where it is now, because a bit like
mm,
physical health, if you continue to work on it, it just keeps improving.
mhm,
Um, so yeah, I would say to everyone, have a daily scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, and see where you are on that scale on any given day. You could be at 10 one day, and then the next day be at 0, and that still be okay. And the day after that be at 3, and the day after that be back at 8.5. But at least you know where you are on your mental health scale. Because think about it, physical health, sometimes we're a bit more tired, we're a bit more hungry, we're just feeling a bit lethargic, and it doesn't actually mean that our physical health is any less than it was yesterday. It just means we're not quite on top of it today. And that's okay too.
Yeah, I hear you, but explain this to me. I know someone very close to me who uh, has more money than I've seen in a long time, have a house, relationship is good, and yes,
Mhm.
still, and I'll tell you, it's a he gets depression, the worst
Okay.
type of depression, right? How do you explain that? Because that was the confusion for me, because I couldn't quite understand. Because I said, well, look, why don't you start exercising? Why don't you start just going out more, doing all those things? And he said, no, Dad, because I left it out then. No, what happens is that I'm in a place, right, where sometimes I just don't feel like getting up and doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
depression is a really tough one to get your head if you've not been there, it's a really difficult one to get your head around, because it really is a
yeah,
place where there is no motivation. And it doesn't
yeah,
matter how much money you have, how many people love you, what you're able to do with your life. If it's there, if it's on the inside, it's there on the
yes,
inside, and you can change all the things outside of you. But actually, what happens
yes,
when we base our wellness or our self-esteem or our sort of our how we feel about ourselves or how we feel about the world on outside entities, it only
yes,
ever works for a limited period of time. And what
yes,
happens then is when it stops working, either you need more, and then we move into the sort of addiction category because you need more and more
yes,
and more of it to feel okay. Or
yes,
you start telling yourself, there's something wrong with me. I've got all this stuff. On paper, my life is amazing. I've got a great house, great family, got all the money in the world, got nothing to complain about. And yet I still don't feel quite okay with myself. What is
mm,
wrong with me? And that precipitates, is that the right word? Yeah, well, that
yes,
sort of
yeah,
snowballs
mhm,
the depressive cycle, because the focus on outside entities isn't changing the internal stuff. And in therapy, often what I'm doing is trying to get people to do the internal work, because if we change too much on the outside without doing the internal work, we just get more and more angry, more and more upset, more and more anxious, more and more depressed, because we get the message that actually, again, I'm not good enough, this doesn't work. And the
mhm,
work with depression and anxiety and any other kind of mental health, diagnosable mental health issue, it is internal. It's a very
mhm.
active internal process, which specifically with depression is challenging, because there is very little motivation to be active.
Right. So tell me this then. How can, if I'm in that place, how can I start to improve my mood? How can I work my way out of that scenario, that situation? What do I do?
My favorite thing to suggest to people when there is a lack of motivation, or something that you classify as depression, is the 1% rule. And that means that, today might have been a really bad day. Maybe you didn't get out of bed, maybe you didn't shower, maybe you just couldn't bring yourself to eat anything or do anything. And that's okay. That's where you're at for today. No judgment. Sometimes the issue is that we are judging what's happening. What's happening may or may not be a problem, but the judgment of what's happening is definitely a problem if we're giving ourselves a hard time. So first of all, take the judgment out of it. Tomorrow's a new day, and you just have to do 1% better than you did yesterday. And that might mean that you get up and you make the bed and you spend the day downstairs on the couch. And then the next day it's another 1% and another 1% and another 1%. And a bit like physical exercise, you'll get to a point where you plateau. You might get to 15% and think, oh, I don't know if I could do this. Nothing more is changing. And that's okay too. The trick is not to give yourself a hard time and send yourself back to zero. Hold yourself at that 15%. And then eventually something will kick in. There's a great phrase in the CBT world, which is you have to activate to motivate. So even if you're finding it really difficult and you're at 15%, 17%, 20%, and you maybe slip back to 13% for a day, you still put the effort in to try and walk around the house or go to the end of the garden, super, super simple things, which annoys people, and it annoyed me as well, because we feel like on some level that we shouldn't be like affirmed for doing stuff that other people find easy. But fundamentally, if you are struggling with depression, a daily feat for you would be getting up and getting washed and getting dressed when you're in that state. And knowing that and being able to give yourself the credit for that is absolutely vital to your recovery.
It's quite interesting that, because I've had a situation where I don't feel like getting up and doing something. Right, that was quite a while ago, but there are certain things I put in place which kind of help me to lift myself up. One is upbeat music really kind of works for me. Right? It just lifts my spirit. All of a sudden, I find myself really wanting to smile and want to laugh. Getting out the house and walking. Right.
Yeah.
In fact, I've been known as well at midnight putting up shelves. Right, and that's often because I'm in that place. Right. What else? Giving a hug to someone. Right. Is really kind of makes you feel good. And sometimes, rather than bottling up a situation that may be bugging you, vent, let it out, really scream it out. I presume you would actually recommend people try any one or a combination of those things as well, if they're ever in that place. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to have like a list of things, a bit like that I could do at any point, things that really occupied me. So for example, I really like music. I used to really like editing music and editing photos and stuff. And I made a list of things that got me involved. So editing something or going for a walk or watching. I wasn't really into TV at the time. It's quite difficult to get into TV when you're feeling that low. But I had a list of things, but I wrote them down, because when you're in that place, I don't know about anyone else, but it's impossible to remember the things that you can do to look after yourself. So yes, do all of those things and have them written down. And that is part of the mental health workout, the book that I've got behind me. It's all about structure, and it's all about having stuff written down in a plan so that you don't have to think about it even when you're feeling low or when you're feeling good, but it's just kind of there, done for you. I think that's where that essence came from, actually.
Sure. And also some of those things may work one day and it doesn't really work as well the next day. So you have to find something new. So if you've got someone in your life or someone you know who is in a mood, maybe in a place, what would you suggest to them to do to try and help that person?
The most important thing in my mind is that you talk to them about how you are feeling, not about them. They know that things are not quite right. They know that they're feeling low. They know that they need a bit of help, or something isn't working for them. But they have to find the sort of chink of light in that to do something about it themselves. And if you go to someone who is struggling and you try and force help on them, they just end up resentful and, you know, potentially doing it on your behalf. And then as soon as you step back, they fall back into their old behavior, which isn't helpful at all. And it means that the person who has forced the help on them is then kind of like, it's almost like they might feel overly responsible for the other person's life and well-being. So with that in mind, the most important thing is that you're able to talk to the person about the effect on you. So when I see you feeling so low, I feel sad. When I see you behaving in a way that is destructive to you, it brings up fear in me. I really want to help you, but I know that you need to find that willingness and that openness within yourself. So if ever you feel ready, come and find me, and I'm really happy to talk about it and see what we can do to support you. But for now, I just want you to know that it is having an effect on me as well. Example. That's something that you could say, because that takes responsibility for your own feelings and doesn't start to take responsibility for what's going on for them, which is entirely their responsibility.
Yes. Yeah. What I'm taking from what you're saying is that you basically say to them, look, I'm here for you if you need my help. If you want to do a project together, we can do a project together. If you want me to go for a walk with you, we can do that. So it's really kind of caring. And I think one of the best things to do is actually to offer them some ice cream. I think ice cream is one of those wonderful things that actually, gets everybody going, doesn't it?
Yeah, ice cream is great. I had one yesterday. It was yummy. But also the thing in there is that you are pointing out to them that it has an effect on you. So,
Yes.
because often when we're in that place, when we're very depressed or we're anxious or we're consumed by some kind of destructive behavior, it's very difficult to see that other people around us are in pain around it. And they always are. You know, 1 in 4 people suffer with mental health difficulties, and then the people that are connected to them, it widens as the circle goes on. But my
Yeah.
point being that saying to them, seeing you like this affects me as well, means that they're able to maybe start to just understand that there's a wider picture and broaden their perspective a little bit. So yes, all the things you just said, but also owning your own feelings about the situation.
Right. So, if I was to say to you, give me a list of 8 things that I could do right now to improve my overall psychological, mental well-being, hit me.
Interesting that you choose the number 8. So I
I don't
have
know.
exactly 8
It could
to
be
give
5
you.
or 6, or it could be whatever. It could be
No, I've
3.
got 8. I've got 8 for you. Okay, so 8 things.
Oh, really? Have
Four
you?
on a week. Yeah, 4 on a weekly basis, 4 on a daily
Yeah.
basis. So on a weekly
Okay.
basis, a
Yeah.
therapeutic space that doesn't have to be sitting in front of a stranger, you know,
Yeah.
pouring your heart out. Some kind of space that is therapeutic to you.
Yeah.
Um,
Sitting
socializing.
down, going through your, sorry to interrupt, sitting down, maybe going through your photo album of all the wonderful times you've spent. Yeah.
You could do that, but I'm talking more about a sort of interactive something where there is someone who can broaden your
Oh, I see.
perspective a
Okay.
little bit.
Got it.
There are all sorts of
Got it.
support groups out there. There are online ones, there are in-person ones. Find a therapeutic
Yeah.
space that really works for you. Um,
Okay.
Socializing a couple of times a week to an
Yeah.
extent that you can handle, whether that's with one other person or 6 other people, making sure that you do see other people. Um, Exercising, obviously, you know,
Hmm.
3 times a week minimum. Um,
Hmm.
Self-care, understanding what a
Yeah.
good self-care routine means for you. And then on the daily side of things, I think mindfulness is excellent. It's a way of training your brain to focus your attention. So whenever your brain wanders off, you train it like a muscle. You train it to come back to the thing that you want to focus on, so you don't end up in those kind of anxious cycles or trauma vortexes. So daily
Hmm.
practice of mindfulness rather than meditation. Um,
Okay.
Connecting with other people, actually understanding what your wants and needs are. Connecting with yourself and other people. So understanding what your wants and needs are, and then also reaching out and saying hi, whether it's over WhatsApp, whether it's a phone call, whether it's actually sort of bumping into someone in the street, and expressing your wants and needs, making sure that you feel seen and heard once or twice a
Hmm.
day. Then I call it appreciation, which basically consists of gratitude and affirmation. I call it appreciation because lots of people who struggle with things like depression and anxiety have tried gratitude and affirmation and found that it's very difficult, Yes, it is difficult. And there are reasons behind that. And actually, all of this is in my book. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, you can grab yourself a copy and, get your brain ticking over. Anyway, and then the last one
Yeah.
on the daily list is movement. Every other species on the planet moves intuitively. They when they have feelings, when they have a reaction, they move intuitively to kind of help that energy move around their body. For some reason, human beings have been left with this lifestyle where we are really stagnant and still, and we don't give our bodies the chance to process the energy and the emotions and the reactions that we have. So make sure that you are moving a minimum of 4 times a day, and that can be walking around the block, it can be emptying the dishwasher, it can be putting the washing line out, it can be having a dance around the room, it can be just having a wiggle or a stretch, but making sure your body has the opportunity to move in a very natural way, a few times a day.
Now, listen, there's some questions coming, and I know we're running out of time, but I just want to get to at least a couple of them. Do you think that many mental health issues are present during puberty?
Do I think that many mental health issues are present during puberty? The answer to that is research based, and the answer is yes. Usually by puberty, we can see whether someone is having difficulty with their mental health. Can't remember the exact age. I think it's 13. There's a particular age, I think it's between 11 and 13, where the brain opens up in a particular way. And I've
Mhm,
got a feeling that it's
mhm.
just after that you can sort of concretely say, yes, this person is vulnerable to difficulties with their mental health. So, yes, usually you can spot it very early, depending on when you hit puberty, but quite early in the teenage years.
Sure. Got another one here. Are nightmares a sign of depression?
Um,
Hmm.
are nightmares a sign of depression? Hmm.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. I'll have to think about
Yes.
that. I don't my initial reaction is no, because when you're depressed, you're very shut down. And yet, but then again, maybe because when you're sleeping, your brain's very active and it could be sort of processing things. But I'm not a sleep specialist, so that would be something I'd have to look into and get back to you on.
Right. Okay. I've got one here which is quite interesting. Can't do mindfulness more than 5 minutes before I get restless. Have now come to terms that it is not failure. It's just not
Mhm.
me.
Perfect. 5 minutes is loads. When I give
Mm,
mindfulness exercises to people, I say 1 minute. Do 1 minute. And if you can't do 1 minute, do 30 seconds. 5 minutes is actually quite a progressed version of mindfulness. I mean,
mm.
I don't think I do a solid 5 minutes a day. So if you're sitting down for 5 minutes and doing mindfulness exercises, good for you. Stay with it. That is going to do you loads of favors in the future.
There's one here which I think is directed at me. What does it go here? How do I motivate myself to exercise, Mr. Motivator? When I did the class with you, I found it great and motivating, but I find it difficult beforehand. Getting started, I'm anxious and not sure I want to. I mean, what can I say? Just keep doing it. The more you do it, the more it becomes a habit. The more it becomes a habit, then it becomes a way of life. So just be patient with yourself. If you can only manage 15 minutes, do 15 minutes. And next time you'll do 17 minutes. Just be gentle with yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Come on. Listen, I think we could keep going. There's more questions coming in, but we can't really go much
Yeah,
longer. Sorry.
yeah.
I want to thank you for your time. I want to say this, right? Remember, everyone out there, every day may not be good, but there's something good in every day. And the one thing that's good about Zoe, she's written a book. And that book, come on, tell them all about it quickly again, please.
So the book's called Your Mental Health Workout. It looks a bit like this. I think it's going to come up on your screen. There it is. Um, and it is most of what I've just spoken about in really
Yeah.
sort of understandable steps to help people look after their mental health just like they would physical health. So it's set out like a physical workout program because we can all identify with moving our bodies. We can't all identify yet with moving our minds. So yeah, you can get it on Amazon or any other good bookshop as an audiobook or a download or in paperback. Um, and I hope you enjoy it.
And you've lived some of the things you're talking about in there, and that makes it real and that
Yeah.
makes it really good for people to actually just read it and have it on your, I say it should be on your book stand. It should be that encyclopedia that you refer to anytime you're feeling down or you need a greater understanding of where you are. I think we've come to the end, Zoe. I want to thank you really for your time. I really appreciate it. I mean, I've known you a lot of years. I've known you from when you were
Yes.
this small to
Yeah, you've
now.
known me through it all.
No, I know. I'm amazed at the journey that you've been on, and I think we'll revisit this another time and do it again. Thank you so much. Keep on doing what you're doing, all right? You're doing a great job out there, and I think everybody should get a copy of your mental health workout. Yeah, thank you for being with me. Yes, thank you, everyone, for
Thank
being
you so
here.
much.
Yeah, thank you. Live and Alive will return, and we've got some new guests joining us over the next few weeks, so look out for it. Thank you all for your time tonight, and I do wish you well. Have a great week, and remember this: the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is that little bit extra. Good night.